What's going on, guys? Tristan and Tony here with the Zero Duck 30 podcast. What's going on, Tony?
Oh, nothing much, son. What's going on with you today?
Oh, nothing. Just getting in on another podcast. But today we got something very unique for you guys that are listening, guys and gals that are listening. Today we have on Kara Nitschke. She is the migratory bird and alligator biologist for the state of Georgia. And as you guys know who listen, we live up here in Northeast Georgia and do our fair share of Georgia duck hunting from time to time. And we're super excited to bring her to the podcast. And Kara, why don't you give everybody some background on you and, how you kind of got into this field. And we appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, super thankful that you could take the time out today to be with us.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. So I've been working for the Department of Natural Resources for, 12 years now.
Wow.
And I'm born and raised in Georgia, lived here all my life in various parts of Georgia. Born in Gwinnett County, went to school at UGA, studied wildlife. I liked it so much I stayed on and got my master's in natural resources. And my emphasis actually in school was nuisance wildlife abatement. That was kind of my interest. But when I graduated, I got a job working as a biologist for the department as a general region biologist. So back in 2010, I got a job with them, and it was on the coast. And I knew nothing about the Georgia coast, but I knew I wanted to work for the department. So I took the job, moved to the coast, and was down there for about 11 years and really, really enjoyed my time down there. Brought me out of my comfort zone a little bit, and I really assimilated into that life, and I enjoyed it. And then I had an opportunity to come back home and take a position as a migratory bird and alligator biologist. So I've been doing that for about a year now.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I know from when we spoke off the air that, a lot of the areas that you worked in are some of the areas that Tony and I are pretty familiar down there along, the southeastern Georgia areas that we waterfowl hunt as well. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's really informed me as a biologist, and my time on the coast has, and it's certainly given me the background I feel like I needed to be comfortable in my role that I'm in now.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a super dynamic environment, as you know, probably way better than we do. You got there's signs for right whales on the boat ramps, and the next thing you know, you're in an impoundment with waterfowl and alligators and just all kinds of stuff going on. Could catch a blue crab and a redfish. You never know.
Yep.
That's right. It's definitely very diverse and rich environment. So that it's just, I think it really showcases some of the natural beauty that Georgia has. I mean, that's the one thing about our state is I've always said, no matter what, if you're a mountain person or you're a coastie or somewhere in between, there's something for you here in Georgia.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of crazy if, when you drive from the most southern part of Georgia all the way up to like Blue Ridge or something, you're like, wow, this has been a crazy drive.
Yeah, this is the same state. That's crazy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, no, I just, and this is going to be a pop-up question, but I'm going to keep it clean. No, but here's something I just thought about that adds a whole nother dynamic to the area. And I'm just wondering if this fell under your responsibility in the area that you were at. But compared to some of the other states that are more Midwestern and not coastal states, there's got to be the whole challenge of Mother Nature with the hurricane stuff. And I mean, how that really just can flip-flop the whole environment when you have, dike damage and all these things.
Oh, yes.
Do those responsibilities kind of fall under somebody that's in that role, or do they work hand in hand with the Army Corps of Engineers and stuff like that? Or, and sorry to throw you an off-the-wall question, but it just hit me, and I thought, wow, that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, it certainly is. So the coast brings along a lot of logistical challenges just because of, just like you said, the dynamic nature of just tidal environments. Things are changing constantly, whether it's attrition. Our barrier islands, we have Sapelo, we have Ossabaw that are under our purview just as far as the Department of Natural Resources handles. So all the logistical, operational things that go on with those islands, whether it's ferry operations to and from the island, barge operations, getting fuel over there, getting everything we need to have power, just everyday logistical stuff that you wouldn't think when you are in school studying wildlife biology that you would have to manage, with the knowledge and the schooling that you have. But those are constantly changing. Our islands are migrating. Just every time a wave hits the shore, it's moving sand, it's displacing. And then, like you said, when we have a kind of a monumental weather event like the hurricanes we've had the past few years, it's just been bam, 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 one after the other. In our capacity, we're left to pick up the pieces. So within our department, we have a response team. So after hurricanes happen, we have a responsibility to handle infrastructure damage to just roads and municipalities, streets, cities, anywhere in those areas that have been affected that need some sort of response, whether it's cutting up trees and moving them out of the road, helping folks out of their houses. We have the equipment to do that. We have boats, so that's what we do first when we're handling a hurricane response. Secondary to that is figuring out how to fix the mess that the hurricane left behind on our management areas. So getting roads back open, repairing dikes, finding the material, getting permitted to find the material to fix the dikes, cap them, get them all back to the way they were before. And especially in a place like Altamaha, where our dike system is basically built out of mud, a hurricane or a high tide event can come through and just decimate years and years and years and years of work. So it's I don't know, we kind of learn as we go with some of that stuff, because it's been so long since we had a hurricane prior to Matthew, I think was the first one in 2015 or 16. It had been so long that there weren't many people that had the institutional knowledge on staff at that point to have lived through or worked through a similar situation to be able to say, oh, I remember what we do after a hurricane. This is what we do.
Wow.
It was us kind of figuring out okay, here's what, Mother Nature has dealt us. Now what do we do to fix it? Should we fix it? Is it worth it? And a lot of wonderment and pondering of, is our dike system antiquated? Can we update it in some way? Can we improve it? Can we prepare for these situations going forward, or better prepare rather? Yeah. So it definitely a huge learning curve, and I'm sure every geographical region in the state has their own suite of issues that they deal with, but I may be a little biased, but I feel like the coast had a lot of unique challenges just due to the volatile nature of weather and the ocean and all that stuff.
Well, what kind of hit me when you were saying that is in particular talking about just the people on staff that had been through a hurricane, had been years, and compared to a state like Florida that just about, the whole state's coastline versus Georgia, it's such a small percentage of the state's coastline. And, in Florida, even if I would imagine it's so common to get hit by hurricanes there that people just kind of, the game biologists from one side of the state just flip over to the other side and help out, or, vice versa, versus a state like Georgia that's mostly not coast.
Sure.
Yeah. And what I had always heard prior to us getting finally hit with a hurricane is that, we don't get them because our coastline, they call it the Georgia Bight. So if you look at the map, our coastline is kind of goes in. And so you can imagine a hurricane kind of bouncing by Georgia and not really hitting it much or affecting it too badly. But we had a couple direct hits in a row, and yeah, we definitely are. I mean, Florida, it's like old hat, you know, they're just like, oh, another hurricane.
Yeah, right.
I feel like, and you don't really realize, or I didn't, just how impactful it is until you're affected and the areas that you manage are affected, and you know your friends and family and everybody that you know essentially is impacted some way by it. It really is, you know, tragic to see so much hard work and so many people's lives affected by something so quick. And it's just, you can't predict, you know, necessarily how it will affect an area or where it'll hit. And it just can be a pretty tragic and transformative thing. So.
Yeah. Now, when you guys have those, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too deep on this, but when you guys have, you like you said, you have these steps and you go out there and you assess it, and you're like, all right, this is what it's going to take in a nutshell to get this the way it needs to be. Now, do you guys have options or grants that you could submit with federal dollars to help with that because it's a coastal area? Or do you mind kind of talking about how that works?
Sure. Yeah. So we do, thankfully, we have, just like anywhere else, we have the ability to be reimbursed with FEMA dollars. So what that entails is first and foremost, you know, taking somebody out to these sites and saying, this is the damage that we have incurred. Them coming out, photographing it, taking pictures, asking a lot of questions. In what state was this water control structure in, for example, prior to it being hit by the hurricane? There's a lot of stipulations involved with FEMA money and being reimbursed that way, or being compensated rather. You cannot make improvements. So it makes sense in your mind as a manager, like, okay, this water control structure has been blown out, it's gone completely, we got to replace it. But we can't let's replace it with something that's improved, something that maybe can withstand an event like this in the future. This water control structure hasn't been updated in decades. Let's go ahead and take this opportunity and make it better. Mm-hmm. FEMA money will cover the cost of replacing what was there, and that's it. No improvements. Yeah. So it takes a lot of thinking outside of the box and creative thinking to sort of, you know, do what you can with what you have, and try to get some workarounds where you can to make some improvements to infrastructure like that. So, and it's a process. You apply for this money. You have to have somebody out there assessing the damage within a certain timeline. It can take years. I mean, it's taken, as y'all have seen, years to get Omaha back to what it was prior to the hurricanes hitting them. Mm-hmm. And then to try to roll that into some improvements as well, to kind of make it better and stronger. So we're kind of finally at the tail end of that.
On the side of things, as far as like the salinity and the, you know, that the hurricane, you know, obviously because the tides and all that, you know, puts in those impoundments. Can you kind of talk about the challenges that brings as far as like getting the plants in there back to the way you guys want them for waterfowl? And because I would imagine that just has its own kind of challenge itself, just getting the water right, you know,
the soil right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a lengthy process, and, you know, not so easy as just pulling the plug, draining out the salt water, and then filling it back up with a hose. You know? Right. You've got to really, it takes time, and it takes, you know, it takes time to kill off. Well, it doesn't take much time, honestly, for saltwater inundation to kind of get rid of the vegetation maybe that you had wanted growing there. You know, it'd kind of just kill it really quickly. Mm-hmm. But pulling that salt water off can take some time, and getting that suite of, you know, fresh or brackish vegetation back the way you want it can take some time. And it varies from impoundment to impoundment. We don't have water control structures in every pool necessarily, so it takes some thinking and maneuvering to get the water out obviously with the tide and pulling that water out, leaving it off, kind of letting it reset and putting water back on at the right time to kind of get your species back the way you want them. So a lot of different things can affect that, weather, tides, all that stuff. So it takes a lot of patience.
Now, with, the, I guess, management of any of the waterfowl areas, not just on the coast in Georgia, like, as far as like foundations like Ducks Unlimited or Delta, or do they help at all with, or is there any funding available through those organizations that you guys can access for projects?
Absolutely. So Ducks Unlimited has been an invaluable partnership that helps in finding grant money, writing grants. They help with engineering for a lot of these projects, and finding, how do I say, kind of unique. We can come to them with a unique situation. Like, we have a causeway that has been washed out during a hurricane, and we were unable to get it patched quickly. It's the hole has grown. It's 100 yards long now of a breach. We need to be able to fix it, and we don't have the manpower or the resources to do it. They do. They have engineers that can come out. They have people who are way more knowledgeable in those sort of infrastructure repairs and maintenance than we do, and they can offer solutions to those unique problems that we face. And they can also offer funding sources, grant they have folks that all they do is write grants and find money. And so, they've been an invaluable partner, not just on Altamaha, but, in other smaller projects that we have in the state as well.
Yeah. No, I even saw, there's it's up probably about 3 hours up the state from the coast down there. And there's a little WMA up there called Horse Creek. And we're driving through there scouting for deer one day, and we're like, well, son of a gun, look at this big plaque right here that was a co-op between the state of Georgia and Ducks Unlimited. So I think it's one thing that is also unique to our state is the amount of wood duck habitat that goes into a lot of the work that you guys do. Because, everybody knows that, if you're a Georgia duck hunter, one thing you're going to go after is a wood duck, for sure,
That's right.
But no, that's very cool. Very cool.
And one thing I'm kind of curious about too is, with Lake Seminole over on, the southwest side of Georgia, and I know you worked more on the east side, Kara, but, that I just found out this past year that that's the number one concentration of like canvasbacks that migrate. And I got to imagine that's a hot spot of management for you guys too in its own way. Over the
well, and study too, I would imagine.
Study, yeah.
Yeah, so Lake Seminole is unique in that we have all the lakes in Georgia, all the reservoirs we have in Georgia are man-made. Okay. But Lake Seminole is different in that it's shallower than, like, say, a Lake Lanier or a Lake Hartwell. So the aquatic vegetation is a little bit more suited for waterfowl. And I don't have as much experience at all over in that part of the world, but it definitely is a big draw for some of those other species, like you said, canvasbacks.
Heck yeah. So, well, as far as some of the quota hunt opportunities in the state of Georgia, some of the ones that we've applied to is obviously Butler Island. There's one that we're probably going to apply to at some point, Dan Denton Waterfowl Pond. Could you kind of go into some of your experience with those opportunities, and just maybe for us, I've only put eyes on like the Butler one. So like, how are they kind of structured the experience when you go there and all that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So they're similar in some ways and then different in some ways. Similar in that it can take a little while to get drawn. So the way our quota system works, you can apply for points only, or you can apply for a hunt, not get picked, and then be awarded a point, a priority point is what we call them. And so when you have built up enough points to and you can go online and see how many points it takes generally to wager to get drawn for any given quota hunt, duck hunt, deer hunt, whatever quota hunt it is. So when you feel like you have enough points and you could be eligible or stand a chance to get drawn, you can wager X amount of points and hopefully get drawn that year. If not, again, you'll get awarded another point, and hopefully the next year you'll have more of an opportunity. So you wager a certain amount of points. That kind of is how many times your name is thrown into the quote-unquote hat.
Mm-hmm.
So it increases your chances of being drawn. For Dan Denton in particular, it does take, I want to say 6 or 7, sometimes 8 maybe points. It takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
But Dan Denton is a very limited opportunity. It's like 100 acres, 2 with a pond, our quota, and then similar to Altamaha and Chamonix, the hunting party can be made up of 3 people total. Mm-hmm. And I think Dan Denton, it's like 2 parties per pond. So it's very, very limited.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's why it takes so long to get drawn. Also, in Georgia, we don't have any fees associated with applying for a hunt. So there's nothing to detract people from just, apply, let's see what happens, So there's a lot of folks vying for these opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Denton is, I think more hands-off in taking care of the hunters. There's no need for them to be physically loaded up onto a trailer and dropped off somewhere. They can drive anywhere they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So they can drop all their gear off where they want to hunt, go hide their truck somewhere, walk back out, and be good to go. And you sign out whenever you leave. You write on a card like your harvest, and so it's kind of a, you're taking the word of the hunter. I killed,
mm-hmm.
Whatever it may be, and they leave the card there for us to take up and see what was harvested. Altamaha is a little bit more hands-on, on Butler Island in particular.
Mm-hmm.
It's bigger, and you can't expect hunters to walk out to their spot. So first off, if you get drawn for Butler, you show up that day, and whatever spots, it's a quota of 25 versus, a quota of 2,
mm-hmm. Right.
Like at Dan Denton. So there's a big difference. So typically we don't have all 25 hunters that were selected show up to hunt. So there's some empty slots, and I think it's always been this way. Those slots that aren't filled can be filled with standby hunters. So if you're just a random, Joe Blow who wants to go hunting, you can show up and get in line and wait to get pick
mm-hmm.
your name out of a hat to fill the standby slot. So typically it's a full house. If those who are selected for the quota don't show up, the standby hunters will fill the rest of the slots. You load up on a trailer, you get driven to your spot, dumped off. Typically there's a John boat there for you, so you can pull your way across the rim ditch and then set up, wherever you want to set up and be ready for your hunt. So, and then whenever you're done, you just kind of wade back out, stand on the dike, and then wait to be picked up and brought back to the check station.
I gotcha. Now, in your time, working with waterfowl and stuff in our state, have you noticed anything, or do you guys kind of key on, like, scientifically, is there anything that tends to be, whether it be weather patterns or the current water conditions on a place like the Altamaha, is there anything that kind of tells you guys, hey, this is going to tend to be a better waterfowl season?
There's certain things, just like any area that you want to duck hunt, that you can kind of look at, I think, to predict maybe your probability of success.
Mm-hmm.
But just like waterfowl hunt anywhere, there's so many different variables that can come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, temperature is always looked at as or not temperature, but just weather is looked at as kind of the main driving force for big pushes of migrating waterfowl.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of rely on, we have an early teal season. You can kind of rely on the teal doing their own thing regardless of weather. They're kind of more temporal than they are, basing their movements on the weather.
Mm-hmm.
But main thing to, I think, use to kind of predict any given time that you want to go hunting is, what the weather's doing, and not necessarily just that, but also water conditions where you are. So what are the water levels? What have they been? Where around you is dry or wet? So that can be a big determining factor. Imagine if you're a duck, making the long haul, and your main focus is finding some water and some food along your journey. That's what you're going to be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So say Altamaha or Butler Island, they have their water levels right. They have everything in place. But, the Savannah Refuge, which is not far as the duck flies from Butler, is dry, or they're doing some repairs or something, and they don't have the resources available like they normally have. That'll determine, that probably more than likely will push more ducks to Butler, because that opportunity to land there and feed is not there that year. So I think surrounding properties and the conditions that they're in is a big determining factor as well.
Yep. That's a very interesting point you bring up, because sometimes you just think about the land you're hunting, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the other states, they deal with that just property by property as you expand out from, say, a WMA, and you got big private landowners that have their own refuges and stuff like that. I mean, all that can change it. Before we got too far away from the quota thing, I just wanted to ask, when it comes to the quota system, obviously with the priority point system, it's basically an earning base type of thing, and you can submit just to get a point if you want to that year. Has there been any talks about potential restructuring of that? Because I know that there's opinions both ways, and I'm just curious, if you guys ever sit down and say, hey, we would consider restructuring this. But, on the flip side of that, if you go to restructure it, you're dealing with a lot of people that have saved a lot of years of points. And how do you manage that into the play without having them all driving around like a bunch of George rednecks with shotguns going off? All right. So, no, but I'd be curious to hear if you guys have ever talked about it or not.
Not that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
I've not heard any rumblings that we plan to make any drastic changes to the way we do our quota system.
Sure.
I think you're exactly right. If we were to make a drastic change in how we do it, it would leave a lot of people in the lurch that have maybe been saving up points for a long, long time, particularly children, that maybe they've been, banking points the whole life of their child's whole life, so they have like a 7-8-year-old child,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been wanting to put in for a youth waterfowl hunt, for instance, or something, and they only get a couple opportunities till they kind of age out of the ability to hunt that hunt. So it would really mess up a lot of people if we were to do something drastically different.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main changes we do make and can make are providing more quota hunt opportunities and, getting those online as we can. So,
that's a great point as well.
So like Altamaha, for forever, we had a quota hunt on Butler Island, and Champney Island was just kind of a walk-in area.
Mm-hmm.
That folks, it kind of was utilized by people who maybe got in line for a standby spot at Butler, didn't get picked, and so they're like, well, I'll just kick rocks and go to Champney.
Mm-hmm.
But we've actually, since the hurricanes, done a lot of work out there and kind of put a lot of effort into rebuilding a lot of that infrastructure out there and made it to where it is now a quota. and that's only been the last couple of years. So we're providing that extra opportunity, and it's a quota of 25 as well, so very similar to Butler, but it's Saturdays and Sundays rather than just Saturdays. So adding opportunity like that, I think, is the best thing we can do, just to provide other opportunities, and not particularly for waterfowl. There's just such limited opportunity there in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting areas kind of up to snuff to where they're, quota ready, is the best thing that we can do.
And
in that regard.
Can you kind of go into, Kara, like a spot like Chapney, like when you guys go into, or really any of the properties out there and along the coast, when you guys go into, let's say, I guess, revamp it or, manage it for the season. I know, for example, like there's times a year that stuff needs to be burnt and times of year that you might plant stuff. Can you kind of talk about that kind of 365 challenge with that? And then also, do you guys like physically like plant stuff, or like does stuff just naturally grow, or how does all that work?
Yeah, so those are great questions. It is. So that's another thing, and it kind of overlaps into your question about what are some predictors of waterfowl movement.
Mm-hmm.
Weather really affects our ability to burn, and particularly on the coast it does. If we're having a wet year, it doesn't matter how badly we want to burn or how good the burn weather is on that particular day.
Mm-hmm.
We may not be able to get in and burn as bad as we want to.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have the ability, when things are right and everything's in place, to get water levels to where we can burn. And we try to do that every year out on the islands, Butler, the Refuge, Rhett's Island, Champney.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get out there and burn because we are promoting native, vegetation out there. We don't do any planting. I think maybe historically they have in the past. It's very difficult. It takes, you can't just, you can try to take a tractor out there
Mm-hmm.
and try to plant, try to disc, but really it takes more of a refined piece of equipment, something like a Marshmaster or something, to really get out there, and even then you'll get stuck. So it's difficult to get out there and plant. So the best that we can hope for is getting good burn weather every year, being able to burn and promote that native vegetation, keeping water levels right to promote that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in a spot like Dan Denton, I think, typically in a good year, they try to get out there and plant every year. So there's certainly benefit to being able to put something out there to attract the ducks,
Sure.
whether it's corn or millet or whatever it may be. If we could do that on Altamaha, we would. It's just such a big area, and there's so much going on, and there's so few personnel to be able to do something like that. So
Sure.
It really is, like you said, a 365. There's not a minute of any day that a manager out there or a technician out there isn't thinking about those impoundments and thinking about ducks.
No, I know with a lot of plants that it's 100% necessary. Like, they talk about it a lot in like the prairie pothole region, or like the California forests or whatever, and there's forest fires and all that. But I know a lot of lakes, they call them like dead lakes or whatever, like areas that, like in Texas, I've heard people talk about big bass fishing lakes that they won't ever drain anymore. They used to be great waterfowl lakes, and then they won't ever drain them because the bass fishing is kind of taken precedence. And then, the plants that used to grow there, because, they might drain the lake and then burn it or whatever. Those plants don't, I guess they kind of have to have that natural like balance of like being reset. Is that right? Or
certainly, yeah. So there's a lot of different species, but a lot of them do depend on the annual cycle of burning and just a period of being dry, like a growing period before water is put on them. So water can be utilized to promote certain species. It can also be used to kind of choke out certain species and kind of get rid of them. So if there's some stuff growing like Sesbania or something out there that we don't want, that we're trying to get rid of. Just keeping it flooded for a while can get rid of the stuff that we don't want.
Gotcha.
And so the thing to do, or the thing that we try to do, is just maintain, what we want out there and do what we have to do to promote that. So with the burning every year, drawing down and burning, and then also when you are putting water back on, not doing it all at once, just doing it a little by little by little and getting it to the right level, to keep, those native species out there that we want.
Well, and, I think so many of us as hunters, we just are always focused on the aquatic vegetation, the plants, and that kind of thing. But, a giant part of ducks' diets, so many species, is all the little things that live in the water.
Right.
The from crustaceans to bugs to frogs to tadpoles, all of these things. Now, do you guys, when you're studying land like that, is that something that you guys kind of take into consideration to promote the habitat overall? Because it's all of these animals are tied together, right? You're creating this environment that one thing spins off another thing. It's kind of like the whole honeybee thing, it's, if you don't have the frog, you don't have the snake. And if you don't have the snake, you don't have the eagle, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys look at that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So there's so many different pools and impoundments on Altamaha that at any given time, there's at least one that's, being managed for moist soil. So it's moist soil management, being managed for those invertebrates like you're talking about, for not just water, or not just ducks, but, anybody who spent some time on Altamaha realizes that, or has seen that there's so many other wading birds, shorebirds, non-game species that really benefit from these areas. And we're looking at the big picture. We're not just managers of game species.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're charged with managing, all natural resources on any given property that we're managing. So those are taken into account as well. And it's like you are trying to provide, nature has it all figured out already. Nature has had it figured out since before we came by and wrecked it.
Sure.
And
right.
made it into. So they know what they need, and us trying to recreate that or replicate that in a way that's helpful and beneficial to the most species, not just ducks. So on an area like Altamaha, there is an emphasis on some of those waterfowl management areas per se. It's not just the waterfowl we're looking at, and there's a whole host of species that can benefit from those invertebrates, just like you're mentioning, fiddler crabs. You got, all the different worms and bugs and things that utilize that moist soil. And that alone, we're not just managing for one duck species. We're not
Right.
just managing for ducks. We're not, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a ability to create kind of a mosaic of different habitat types out there for a bunch of different species.
Now, since we're talking about some of those animals, when we was off air, you threw in the whole alligator on us, as a part of your title, which is so cool. To preface going into this, Tristan and I were hunting down at the Altamaha, and the sun came. Well, not even before the sun came up, we got out to our spot and we shined the flashlight out, and I counted just over 50-something gators in my view that were all just sitting there, and we're used to them. I mean, we see them all the time. For the most part, you're not going to see very rarely do you see anything really big, but you're going to see everything from your 1 foot longs to your 5-6 foot longs, so we're so used to them. But when we had one of our friends out there that wasn't so used to them, it was like every minute he's like, "Did you see that gator? Did you see what it's doing? Did you see that one coming closer? Did you see it?" The whole time. I got to ask, has there been an explosion of gators out there? Because that is the most I've ever seen out there. And that was just in the area we were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Definitely alligators are near and dear to my heart. And they're a very unique game species, and they're our only, game species that's a reptile. They're a long-lived species. They take a long time to reach, reproductive maturity. So recruitment is always something that we're looking at very closely. We run alligator population census surveys annually in the summer months, just to try to get an idea of our statewide population. And there's a handful of routes that we run on Altamaha in particular. And so, we try to make our management decisions and try to set our quotas based on our population, which we're monitoring every year. And so we don't ever want to set our harvest numbers too high, because it would take a species like an alligator longer than it would like a deer to rebound from an overharvest situation. Deer recruitment happens a lot quicker than alligator recruitment. And so we consider in the state of Georgia alligators as a conservation success story because they used to be listed. They were federally listed. They were protected. They were considered an endangered species. And now we have, due to, management and, our conservation efforts, managed them to a point where the population is such that we have a season and the population can sustain a certain amount of take and harvest every year. Mm-hmm. So to hear that it looks like we have an overabundance of alligators in any particular place is a great thing. Every year we do an aerial nest survey on Rex Island. So we try to observe and count alligator nests. And then again, we do during the summer months our censuses. So we really are trying to promote a population that is huntable. We don't want to lose that opportunity ever again because so many people enjoy it. It's a very unique hunting opportunity. Mm-hmm. People come from all over the state and out of state to enjoy it. And it's so different. It's such a different experience than any other type of hunting. You're out and about, you're in the water, you're kind of in that resource. It's not a passive hunting experience. You're really getting down and dirty with it, finding gators and trying to hook them and get them up to the boat. So we don't ever want to lose that opportunity. And it's a balance. You're trying to balance, you're trying to mitigate conflict, human alligator conflict. You want to reduce that sort of issue that we have with people who live in and amongst alligators, because it's a natural fear, it's a natural worry, especially people who maybe didn't grow up around alligators or moved here from a state that doesn't have alligators at all. I think it's just a natural thing for folks who are not used to being around them or accustomed to being around them to be a little bit wary of them. So we want to maintain an alligator's natural fear of us. And hunting is a good way to do that so that we don't have any issues like some other states unfortunately have with, human alligator conflict.
Yeah. And we haven't ran into a bird or an alligator eating one of our birds in Georgia, but just last year at a WMA in Florida, there was a couple teal that we shot out of this group, and we had them sitting out there, and I think we'd shot like a ringneck or something before that too. And it's like thick with hydrilla at this certain WMA, so wading out there is kind of a chore. And we're like, well, we're going to wait a second because the birds are flying good. And one of the alligators came and took one of the birds.
Two
of them? Okay. Yeah. So we were like, all right, forget that. We're going out there and getting them. But, even then, it's not, I've never had them, and I've asked people that have hunted in the South way longer than we have. And very rarely do you hear of somebody saying, oh, this alligator was aggressive with me. And I think that's a good point you brought up about making sure there's the natural fear balance with alligators is they are, naturally not going to want to be around you.
Right.
Yeah, it's very important. And it's important for the safety of people,
Mm-hmm.
but also the safety of alligators, you know. So it's something we're fortunate in this state to not have really had too much of an issue with historically as any sort of conflict that resulted in, you know, injury or, you know, heaven forbid, a death. Because there always is that potential. So they're definitely, they can grow, they can get really, really big over time, and they definitely, I don't know, I don't want to say, I think, you know, they're very food motivated and driven in that way, but I think they're far more intelligent than maybe we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they definitely persevere. You know, there's no doubt, because, I mean, when we've been on that area when it's been in the 20s, you know, and you got a gator sitting there just next to your foot, and you can literally just sit there and push them around with your toe, and they're just like,
Yeah.
they're so lethargic they can barely even move, you know. And
Right.
I'm like, man, they endure these winters and everything else, you know. Very cool stuff with the alligators. You know, I'm sitting here and you were talking about what goes into supporting these WMAs, and it's every WMA, not just the coastal ones we're talking about here specifically. And we're talking a lot about this area because it is one of the unique areas that we have in Georgia that has the type of environments for coastal waterfowl. You know, us as hunters, I think that we're all, you know, we're selfish people by nature, you know, and, you know, we say, I want my tax dollars to make this impoundment better, or, you know, I pay my taxes and what are they doing over there? You know, they're lazy, or whatever you might say as a duck hunter, you know, because you just want results, right?
Right.
I think so much of the back end of it, you know, you talked a lot about time and going through that stuff, but, you know, if you're limited on the resources that you've been budgeted that come from way up the chain, you know,
Right.
It's all based on so many factors that I don't even want to try to spiral down right now. But is there something that us hunters, that if we're passionate about a certain area, or just in general, you know, waterfowl in general, is there some things that we can do to try to get the ears heard up that chain a little bit better? That, you know, I've always said when it comes to federal and state funding, it's all about who screams the loudest, you know, and they want facts too, and no doubt about it. But is there something that we could do more than just sitting back and complaining? That,
or also, as a follow up to that,
yeah,
volunteer opportunities.
Yes.
Maybe get into some of that as far as getting boots on the ground too, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, can you talk a little bit about those types of things?
Sure. So, yeah, just like you said, there's a lot of factors that contribute to where our limited resources are kind of spent or focused. And certainly, like you said, I think it's human nature. You know, you're going to focus on, as a hunter, the areas that you like to frequent, or the areas that are close to where you live, and you want to see those thrive and do well and be managed, you know, well. And, you know, I say it really depends on the region that you're in, the staff availability there, where we're at as far as, you know, are we fully staffed? Or is there an area where we've had somebody retire or move somewhere else? And everything with the state takes time. So rehiring takes a little while. And in the meantime, maybe some things have fallen to the wayside, or so it seems. You know, there are certain things that take precedent, certainly when it comes to just overall management of a WMA, you know, keeping roads cleared, keeping them passable, keeping roadsides mowed, things like that. Providing access is first and foremost. And then from there, you know, focusing on whether it be installing or creating new food plots or wildlife openings for deer, or whether if it's a quail focal area, you know, putting your resources towards quail management, or whatever that particular area. There may be maybe kind of a focus on a different species. So depending on what region you're in, that can affect it. But if there's something that a hunter sees, this has always been this way, and here recently I've noticed it's kind of, fallen to the wayside, or this isn't being managed how it historically has been being managed. It could be just a change in staff. It could be just shifting gears priority-wise, region-wide, and it is an unfortunate truth that, the squeaky wheel kind of gets the grease in a lot of cases. So submitting, not necessarily complaints, but just, submitting inquiries. We have, a forum for doing that on our website. And I would say speaking to somebody, so you can submit an inquiry on our website and get a response from somebody, but being able to figure out who you need to talk to, who is the manager of any particular area. You want to talk to that person, and there's nobody who's not reachable in the department. We all have cell phones, we all have office phones, we all have a way to be in touch with constituency, so there's nobody you can't reach. The key, I think, would be reaching the right person and having their ear so that they can understand exactly what you're talking about. Because if you call any given office and you can talk to somebody and say, I've noticed that this, this impoundment that has historically been, flooded at this certain time hasn't really been being messed with in the past couple seasons. They may say, okay, I'll make a note of that and I'll let somebody know. But if you were to say, well, who's the manager? Can I, can I get their number, or can you leave a message for them to call me back? And just being able to speak directly with that person to get an idea of, hey, what's going on with this? They could say, well, actually, this impoundment, we're kind of got it offline right now because we're going to replace that water control structure next year. We're getting ready for that. So we've got contractors coming in or whatever. Being able to talk to them and find out exactly, because there's going to be a reason for any perceived neglect, maybe from the public standpoint. It may look like an area is getting neglected or something, or just not getting the attention that it deserves necessarily, and finding out what that reason is. And then, if you have the means to do so, just ask, hey, is there any way I can help? What can I do? I have availability on these days. I have tractor experience. I'll sign a we have volunteer waivers that, we can have folks sign that want to help and get to work doing something.
Man, that's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I just think it's just such an important point to discuss these things because, like you said, the perception might not be the reality, and it might just be money. It might just, hey, there's only so much money a year, and maybe there was a part of an WMA that some of those resources had to go to because trees fall on a tornado hit or, so now, they need to get access opened up, all these different things that funnel into what happens with those things. I just think is such an important part for us to try to realize. And then if you're that concerned about it, Kara's just giving you what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like pretty much site specific. You want to get intimate with it. I think Georgia's given you the opportunity to do that, which is all you can ask for.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Definitely. Yep. I think, our resources, certainly on, I'm not even speaking, monetarily, but just staffing and vehicles and equipment. So it's exactly like you said, if there's a project that's been coming down the pipeline for a while and we're staging up for that, it's like, okay, we got to get ready. We got to have the area managers from this WMA, this one, and this one get together for the next little while and start working on this repair or this, we're tearing down a bridge and we're rebuilding it, or we're redoing a check station somewhere. We have to pull, and when we pull from other areas, some of the things that normally would be, being done, on a annual basis, maybe get skipped over that season or something. And I'll say that our folks, all the technicians I've worked with and all the biologists I've worked with in my career, there's a sense of ownership that, and pride, personal pride in their areas that they're tasked with managing. And so none of them really appreciate being pulled from those responsibilities necessarily, but definitely understand that it takes a team to get some of these tasks accomplished. And so with the understanding that when their property needs, kind of a big overhaul in some fashion down the line, that the other guys will come, kind of drop what they're doing on their areas and come help them. So we all want to see the areas do well and look good and provide, opportunity and enjoyment to the folks that use them.
Yeah.
And do you guys, just from a standpoint of, that ownership, you guys, a lot of the people that are on these properties or whatever, I would imagine they probably like to hear too, like, hey, we had a good day. We just want to call and tell you guys, like, hey, this is what we observed. Or even if it wasn't a good day and this is what you observed, like you were saying earlier, I'm sure both sides of the fence, it's probably good to, share that information with you guys, I'm sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we're always happy to hear from the folks that are using the areas, whether it's a suggestion for how we could do something differently or just, I'm sure that really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and who did we have on the podcast, Tristan, that talked about to never lose sight of the fact that the folks that are part of every state's organizations that are involved with waterfowl, they got into that because they love it. Okay. That this is what they made their career out of. And so before you go back and thinking, oh, this person doesn't care, about this WMA. And I think that sometimes we need to first, people are people, and I'm sure that sometimes people have to be replaced. It's just natural with any business, and sometimes there's complacency and things like that. But for the most part, everybody that has gotten into managing a WMA, say the waterfowl portion of that, they're doing that because, like I said, they take that ownership and this is what they love to do, So I just think it's important to make that note to our listeners that before you go, the odds are that there's probably more going on behind the scenes that affect what's going on, not just that person necessarily.
And I'm pretty sure that was Dr. Brad Cohen, and I'm pretty sure, I think you said off the air, Kara, didn't you guys go to school together? Or you spent some time together?
That's right. Yeah. He, I want to say, was getting his PhD when he's a couple years ahead of me, but he was either getting his master's when I was an undergrad. He was ahead of me, or either he was working on his PhD when I was in grad school. But I had a couple classes with Bradley, and he knows his stuff. Definitely knows his stuff when it comes to waterfowl.
It's cool.
But he's for sure, he's right about that. About nobody gets into this line of work because their arms being twisted. There's nobody being doing it because they're forced to. You can't get on with the state without at least a 2-year degree. So there's some measure of education requirement there, which, and then on the backside of that, we're not getting rich off of it. So we're putting in the time because we love it, and because I would say, I know for myself, you enjoy helping people, you enjoy seeing other people enjoy the things you enjoy. So there's a human dimension aspect to it. You're not just doing it because you love the resource and because you love the animals that you work with or you love hunting, but it's also that you love your fellow hunters and you want to see them succeed and do well and get enjoyment off of, from the areas that you're getting enjoyment off of and working hard on.
Absolutely. Well, alrighty. Well, I think that's pretty much, that was awesome stuff, Kara. think pretty much any questions that I had going into this, you've done a great job of answering, which has been awesome. And do you have anything, Tony? Or
well, I just in a nutshell, just to wrap it up, I think it's just important for us as hunters to first take on the attitude of ownership. If we want to do something with the land, who was it? It's a Meat Eater who he said, "This is my public land." This is my this is my public land, and it is our public land. You can look at it that way, but I think that instead of less complaining and more action is a thing that all of us hunters can do to help these WMAs or folks that have been put in these positions. There's no doubt, at least for the state of Georgia, that there's some things we can do to get involved. Travis Thompson talks about all the time being there. There's a county meeting regarding conservation
down in
Florida. And he's like, there's 5 people here, you guys, what are we doing? If we want it to be better, we need to have 75 people there. Those are just things I think it's important to note that us as hunters, we can take more personal action to make this land better. And if we all just work as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, public forums. I mean, we hold public meetings annually. We hold public meetings before we go into our regulation cycles every year. There are always forums for in-person, the ability for you to in-person voice your concerns, opinions, statements, gee whiz, whatever you want to,
compliments.
Yeah, we'll take those all day long. So they're just, in general questions, concerns. I mean, that, I know in this day and age, everything seems like it's all online or all, but we still have, and they're published in our hunting regulations in our popular guide every year. Those public meetings, we try to have one in every region every year just to have that interface with constituency and just to gauge public interest, outcry, whatever it may be. Because for sure, we're all public servants. We are serving the people of Georgia, and we're not doing that in a vacuum. We're doing that we welcome and want and need y'all's input. So
good stuff. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We're keeping you from making our duck hunting better for about an hour today. So,
well, thank you guys for the opportunity to chat about ducks and alligators and everything in between. I always enjoy it. So,
well, we'd love to have you on again. From time to time, and just kind of talk about some, either whether they're projects or things you guys are seeing on the biological side of stuff that you're excited about. And we definitely need to have you back on again.
Sure. Be happy to do it. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Have a great day.
Just so you know, we'll post this on Monday. So.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you, Kara.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I thought it was good.
I thought it went really good.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of great